In this video, we will take a look at the filter and map built-in functions and how they can be used with lambda functions that we saw in the previous section. The filter function returns an iterator where the items of an iterable are filtered through a function to test if the item is accepted or not. And we'll see that we can use conditions to test values in a list and filter out values if they do not meet those conditions. The map function executes a specific function for each item in an iterable. Each item in the iterable is sent to the function as a parameter. Let's start up the PyScripter and check out the filter and map functions. Let's create a list of tree heights. We'll set this equal to our square brackets and we'll put in heights in meters of 2.4, 5.6, 3.0, 7.8 and 10.1. We'll hit enter and we now have a list of heights. We'll pretend that these trees belong in a plantation and we want to remove all the smaller trees that are less than 5 meters tall and plant them elsewhere because they're not getting enough light with the bigger trees around them. Let's define a function, def, and we'll call it split heights, and it accepts a height as the parameter. If height is less than or 5 meters, return true. Otherwise, we'll use else and return false. We now have our function that we are going to use with our built-in filter function. We'll create a variable called move trees and we'll set that equal to our filter function. Now our filter function takes a parameter of a function as the first parameter. Our function is going to be the split heights. You do not need to put in the parentheses or supply in a parameter. We use a comma and we set our iterable parameter to our heights list. I'll hit enter. So what's happening here is we're calling our filter function and we want to apply the split heights function on all our heights values. The filter will return any value that returns true. If I print the move trees variable to screen, we can see we have a filter object. We use a for loop for height in move trees, print the height. We see we only have values that are less than our 5 meter threshold. So any value from the filter that returned true was returned in our filter object. And there are only two values that satisfied our condition, and that was 2.4 and 3.0. We want to move these two trees so they have some sunlight to grow bigger. This is one of those occasions where creating a function like this might be a little bit of an overkill and we can use a lambda function instead. We'll overwrite our move trees variable and we'll set this to equal our filter once more. Instead of supplying in our split heights as our function, we're going to define a lambda function. So lambda, which will take in a height parameter, and we want where height is less than 5. This here forms the function part of our filter, just like split heights did here. We put in our comma and we want to use each value in our heights list. I'll hit enter and we'll print move trees to screen and we can see it is still a filter object. If we wrap our filter in a list, so we'll use the list function and hit enter, and now we print our move trees to screen, we see we have a list that satisfies our filter. So just to recap, the filter function has two parameters. The first is a function to define the filter, whether a value will be true or false. We can see here where height is less than 5. If we check our original list, 2.4 is less than 5, so that returns true. 5.6 is greater than 5, so that returns false. 3.0 returns true, and the rest also return false. Only the true values are returned in the filter, so we get 2.4 and 3.0. Now we'll take a look at the map function, which applies a function to all items in an iterable. So we saw that the filter was weeding out values based on a condition. Map applies the same function to every item in a list or another iterable. We'll create a function called square num. We'll call it def square num, and this takes in a number to be squared, and we'll return, and we'll use the pow function that we saw in a previous video, and that will be the num to the power of 2. We'll define a list of values. We'll set it equal to our square brackets, and we'll put in 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. So we want to square each of these numbers. I'll call the map function. Similar to the filter function, the first parameter is the function to use for each value in an iterable, and that is our square num function. We do not need the parentheses, and our iterable is our values. I'll hit enter, and we can see we get a map object returned. Within this map object, the square num function has been applied to every value in our list. If we call the map function again and supply in our square num and values, and this time we wrap the map function in a list function and hit enter, we can see we get the values returned. 2 to the power of 2 is 4, 4 to the power of 2 is 16, 6 squared is 36, 8 squared is 64, and 10 squared is 100. Similar to the example above for filter, creating a function for this may be overkill, and we can use a lambda function. We'll call our map function, and instead of supplying in a named function, we can use lambda. The parameter for our lambda is num, and we want to square each number. Here I'm using the asterisk. We could have used the pow function, and we want to supply in our values iterator. So in this instance, our lambda function is replacing our square num function from the previous example. This now forms the function parameter for the map function, and we're going to apply this function to each value in our values iterable, in our values list. I'll hit enter, and we know we get a map object. I'll hit up, and I'll wrap that map function in the built-in list function, and hit enter, and we can see we get the exact same result as our previous example. In this video, we saw the use of the built-in functions filter and map, and how they can be used with a lambda function. Both the filter and map built-in functions take two parameters. The first parameter is a function, and the second parameter is an iterable. For the filter, the function must be conditional, where there is a true or false returned for each item in the list. Only those items that pass with true are returned in the filter object. With the map function, you are applying the function to every object in the list. More often than not, you will use lambda functions when using filter and map built-in functions.